Hello, a very warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us today as part of the New York City Climate Week 2021 for this event, Transforming Cities for People and Planet through Integrated Urban Development, and to mark officially the launch of UrbanShift. And I'm doing this welcome on behalf of UNEP and the project partners, WRI, ICLEI, C40, UNDP, the World Bank, the ABB, and as well the Global Environment Facility that is funding UrbanShift under its Sustainable Cities Impact Program. I have a couple of housekeeping issues. The first is we do have simultaneous interpretation. It is provided in English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Chinese, and Indonesian Bahasa. And to activate the interpretation in the language of your choice, please click on the interpretation at the bottom of the Zoom window as shown on the slide. And I think you've all seen already that the meeting is recorded, so please accept that as well. And then the next housekeeping issue is the questions and answers. If you have any questions about the program, please click on the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom window. Please note that these questions will not be addressed live, unfortunately, because we have such a packed program, but we will do our best to respond in writing during the event or afterwards. And with that, a quick overview of the agenda. We have a very full 90-minute agenda ahead of us and a truly impressive lineup of speakers with the principals of the 4 organizations leading the global program, the CEO of the Global Environment Facility, as well as mayors and national officials of the participating countries and some project partners as well involved in the implementation. After a short opening session with strategic insights in the importance of cities to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement and the SDGs, we will hear more about UrbanShift. We will then have a first panel of mayors, national government officials, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development with a private sector lens, discussing how they are taking or tackling the transition to green and just cities. And this is followed by a second closing panel gathering representatives from the organizations involved in the implementation of the project in the participating countries and cities. And with that, without further ado, I would like to transition to the opening session and introduce our 2 first speakers representing the lead agency of UrbanShift, Inger Anderson, the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program and Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. And we have Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, CEO and Chairperson of the Global Environment Facility. With that, Inger, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martina and Carlos Manuel and colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I send you greetings from Nairobi, the only UN headquarters in the Global South, which we are very, very proud of. Look, in UNEP and in the UN, as a matter of fact, we speak about these 3 planetary crises. And in each of these crises, we see the city intersect. On climate, obviously, we understand that the cities are greatly impacted by climate change, yes. And even that optimistic target of 1.5 degrees in global temperatures could cause sea level rise up to 1.7 to 3.2 feet. But we also need to understand that cities are a major contributor to climate change, but it is also the place where the solutions lie. And on the biodiversity crisis, we need to just understand that the global demand for sand and gravel, the 40 to 50 billion tons a year that is destroying our ecosystems, that's crowding out wildlife, the fragmentation that we are seeing in our natural habitats. And of course, the IPBES numbers bear this out in terms of how we are threatening our biodiversity. And on pollution, we know that more than 90% of people live in areas where the air quality exceeds WHO standards. So just to say that if you live in cities, you have a solution at your hands for climate, for biodiversity, and for pollution, and you are suffering of the impact of these 3 crises as well. And so what is interesting here is that cities are now on the forefront of trying to turn these challenges into opportunities. We're seeing an increasing number of cities that are setting high ambition targets for climate mitigation and adaptation. We're seeing mayors leaning in, we're seeing innovation, design, building design, urban design. We are seeing life cycle approaches. And the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has spoken about it is time to grab the generational opportunity to put sustainability at the heart of our city strategies. And that is where UrbanShift comes in. It is such an opportunity, and I'm really, really honored to be here today with this distinguished group of panelists, because we have to have a global conversation together about how we are going to design and how we're going to build urban infrastructure, as well as how we are going to retrofit already built infrastructure. We need to talk about power generation, transport, and the very construction material. And that will be crucial for us to achieve not only the Paris Accord, but also the nationally determined contributions. Obviously, needs to therefore reflect this, but it will also be critical for the post-2020 biodiversity framework and for the various pollution conventions that we have in place. So this is a place where this community comes together that has cities at its heart, but may come from different on-ramps in the community. I give a big, big thank you to the GEF for trusting us at UNEP to steer this global direction of UrbanShift in 23 cities in 9 countries. We are very, very appreciative, and we will do our level best together with our partners, UNDP, Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, as well as WRI and many others that are present here that were mentioned by Martina. But we need to think about UrbanShift not as a project that has a beginning and an end, but as a community that is, and a movement that is determined to take these challenges on and move forward. And with the pandemic, obviously, UrbanShift can take forward some, yes, opportunities in the middle of this crisis to reset and to shift gears. We can talk about circularity. We can talk about shorter value chains. We can talk about changes to unsustainable consumption and production patterns, the linear models that we've used in our construction industry up until now. We can talk about, as the Secretary General does, making peace with nature. And we can talk about including the power of nature-based solutions right into city design. It's good for our health, it's good for our cities, it's good for our mental health, and it's certainly good for climate and nature. So it's all about building back better. And as we understand, this transformation is beginning to happen, but we need to have it happen much faster. The UrbanShift program can be a key lever to help urban leaders to do just that, to work closely with cities all over the world, to build that capacity, to offer up solutions, to implement projects, to exchange experiences and mitigate and adapt to climate change, but also protect biodiversity and bring down pollution. This will take collaborative governance and between local and national governments, and of course, the private sector, the civil society, as well as technical shifts. Now, with respect to in-country work, we from UNEP are pleased to be involved in supporting Argentina, Brazil, India, South Africa, and our partners there are doing incredible work. And we will hear about some of this today, but we will also hear from other countries where other implementing partners are supporting this. But we see, for example, that Johannesburg has made the commitment to go climate neutral by 2050. And we see the GEF project supporting them in achieving this goal. Or we see India, where the government, through the Smart Cities mission, aims to improve the quality of life through a clean and sustainable environment and through application of smart solutions. And the focus here is on sustainable and inclusive development that can lead to densification and compact areas. The GEF project is building on this important initiative to innovate and to scale up good both local and global actions. UrbanShift sets out to be this movement, as I said, to really accelerate and to scale up based on the momentum that we hope to create in these 23 cities. but also the noise around what these cities are accomplishing can very much lead to other cities adopting it on their own. And that's obviously what we want. So shifting that global discourse and actions towards a more sustainable future. So here, beyond these 23 cities, that's where the lever comes in, where we, together with many others, will work with the MDBs to connect UrbanShift with the banking sectors, with the investor alliances, and obviously in our house through the UNEP Finance Initiative. And we will advocate for sustainable investments to ensure that the cities we build in the future, using both public and private funds, are aligned not only with key sustainable infrastructure, but also with critical investments in nature-based solutions and ecosystem restoration. Today, we're going to hear from a range of partners on how we're going to go about this, on what the plans are and what has already been achieved, and how we can together drive these solutions towards sustainable and inclusive cities. And I'm really, really pleased to see that Carlos Manuel is, with his beautiful background, I can't compete with that one, ready to speak now. And so, Carlos, I've been told I should hand it right over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Inger. And it is the other way around. We at the GF are really, really grateful and very excited to continue engaging working with UNEP and the larger partnership in this new vision of UrbanShift. And as you said, Inger, in just a matter of a decade and a half, many of the countries in the global south has gone from this rural-based economy into a urban life. And unfortunately, Inger, even though we design policies and legal frameworks and institutions to deal with the urgent environmental issues, most of those approaches were aimed at rural areas where we used to have, and even continue to still have the big environmental challenges, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, land use change, water pollution. Unfortunately, Inger, we were not able to see the changes. And as we became more urban people in the South, we had the need to create the proper policies and the proper institutions to deal with these new environmental sustainability challenges at the urban level. A good example is my country, Costa Rica. Costa Rica was very successful in designing policies and agencies and institutions where the environmental problems were located. They used to be located in rural areas. And as we became more of an urban society, we were unable to plan ahead and be able to propose solutions and ideas that can cope with the present environmental challenges which are in the urban cities. That is why when I arrived to the GA, well, when I was a minister in 2018, and I look and thought on how to optimize and maximize the GEF resources, it was a very easy decision to me, Inger, in 2018 to use the Sustainable Cities Impact Program in Costa Rica as the most important window of opportunity with the GF, and that is why we began working. We began working accessing these Sustainable Cities program that started in 2016 as an integrated approach pilot project at the GF, but also we learned a lot. There's a lot of biodiversity in the cities. The biodiversity is already there, located in the cities. We were unable to identify that. We were unable to understand that we can create large green biodiversity related protected areas in urban cities, creating corridors, making the green spaces more attractive for the people who live in the cities, helping us to deal with the impacts of climate change at the city level. The more you invest in the green areas of the urban cities, the more resilient the cities will be, and the better the health of those people. So that is why we look at GEF 8 as a great opportunity to really do leap forwards in what we've been doing from the GEF with UNEP and the largest partnerships towards these new adjustments in terms of the focus, in terms of the scale, and in terms of the number of cities that we want to work. As you know, we've been able to mobilize more than $300 million in these programs, and I'm very ambitious on what we look forward in GEF8. Also, one element that I think is extremely important is that the GEF recognizes that the work that we do through this impact program and our larger partnership should means that mayors and leaders of the city should have a more direct access to the GEF funding. As of today, they need to go through national governments and then, the whole process. We're thinking on ways by which we can facilitate through more direct access the GEF resources to mayors and leaders from the public and the private sector at the city level, which will give us the conditions for more innovation, for upscaling and amplifying what we are already doing, but most importantly, what the city leaders have already in their minds and their plans. So that's an innovative approach that we're promoting at the GEF8 replenishment process, and I look forward for that to be a major shift on how we've been supporting cities and mayors and citizens through our approaches. So I'm pleased that we now begin the implementation of this new approach. This program should build on all these lessons that and experiences that began in GEF6. And also, we look with high optimism on and expectations on the new phases in which we look for more strengthening, more integration. The GEF moves more and more into higher integration in what we do, not just in the impact program, but also, and very importantly, within our focal areas. We're promoting full flexibility in the use of the focal area resources, which will give countries and cities the possibilities to integrate, to design projects that integrate land restoration, climate change, and biodiversity conservation in a more coherent, comprehensive manner. So the role of city governments, as I said, is fundamental to achieve all of these commitments and targets in the next decade. We see projects at the city level that integrates the Paris Agreement, the post-2020 biodiversity framework, as well as with the SDGs. And this will help us reduce chemicals, improve air quality, deal with solid and waste and hazardous substances in a more integrated approach. So this global green recovery from the pandemic will also drive opportunities to cities and cities transformation. So thank you so much, Inger, for joining us. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We look forward to continue engage in this magnificent initiative that will deliver many important outcomes at the environmental and socioeconomic level. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlos Manuel. And you bring real life experience because you've been on the front line of a country seeing these developments and being on the front line of bringing sustainability is very, very helpful to have you in the current job now. So thank you so much. It's wonderful, your leadership. Now we're going to shift gear and we're going to go over to Annie Dasgupta, who is the president and CEO of WRI. And Annie is going to give to us a presentation about the UrbanShift program. So I hand it over to you, Annie.
Thank you very much, Inger. It's an absolute privilege to be here with you and Carlos Manuel to be launching this program that's been developed with all the partners that you'll meet over years. As you can imagine, I mean, this has been a really relatively hard last year and a half. And actually, it's been harder if you were a city leader. So for the next 10 minutes, I can see a lot of people have joined us today for this conversation from all over the world. I want to encourage you to think about yourself for the next 10 minutes as a city leader, and you were running a city, and you will find yourself at this moment in a pretty difficult place for 3 big reasons. One, you obviously know the responsibility Inger just talked about you as a city leader, but what happens in cities don't only matter to you and the citizens who live there, but matters to the world. The most of productivity of wealth of the world actually are now generated in cities, more than 80% of it. Most people live in cities. 2.5 billion more people will live in cities. So how cities work matters to how human well-being is. And finally, cities are the center, because of most activities are economic activity, a center of GHG, the carbon emissions of the world, 70% of them. So if cities don't work, cities don't function in a way that it produces jobs, produces employment, also reduces carbon, there is no chance of us to getting to 1.5 degrees. The science is very absolutely clear about this. And the no chance of us to get to 1.5, to half our emissions by 2030. So that's the immense responsibility you feel as a city leader today. Second, you also see the opportunity. Cities across the world, even actually more so during the pandemic, have innovated out about one solution after another. They're all over the world. Innovations taking place in transportation, on energy, on biodiversity, but are they connected? But you will hear a lot more about that in a minute. So opportunities to do things in cities are immense. People talk about cities as factories of innovation. This is absolutely true. The third thing you'll find yourself is a set of very big challenges. And this challenges has been magnified, actually, in some ways, kind of made more visible, I think, during the pandemic. A lot of people in cities, about more than 1 billion people in cities today, live in slums. This is a very significant proportion of people who live in cities who don't have access to normal services like water, sanitation, electricity. That's one issue. Of air quality, what's happening? Of 80% of global South working population in informal sector. So you will find not only these challenges, but you will find, especially if you're running a city in global South, the per capita investments that's available to you to do something about these challenges are very, very limited and shrinking. And COVID has shown us more than ever how unequal our cities are. Though this was a global pandemic, and it is a global pandemic, the poor, it's been a very urban-centric pandemic, but poor in those cities have been absolutely more devastated, not only by the disease, but also lack of employment. This is true for global North cities, global South cities, cities everywhere. It's true in New York City, true in Delhi. So these are the sets of challenges you will face. And you as a leader with limited resources would have to do 4 things. You have to create jobs because of what just happened in pandemic. Otherwise, India alone has lost more than 10 million jobs during the pandemic. You would have to increase quality of life of all your citizens. While do that, you have to protect nature, the absolute reason Inger and Carlos pointed out why that is so critical of the relation of cities and nature and ecosystems. While you do these 3 things, you have to decarbonize your practice. This is the set of challenges you face as a leader. And if you were having this conversation 20 years back, we could have entertained the conversation, oh, we will fix nature first, then we'll create jobs, then we'll decarbonize, and then we will get to quality of life. That opportunity is gone. There is no opportunity that. There is 9 years left to get to 50% reduction. Right now, if you're a city leader, you would have to solve these 4 problems at the same time. What are the solutions that allow you to do this multiple outcome? This is the reason UrbanShift was created. It was created to create a new practice that Inger talked about as a movement that helps city leaders like you to figure out what solutions are there. What can I use my absolutely meager resources to invest in a way that gets us to the outcome we need, that helps us not only decarbonize, create jobs, make it nature positive, but increase the quality of life of 3.5 billion people who live in cities. That is the opportunity, that is the ambition with which this program is created. So the question is, what will it do? It'll focus on actually how the practice can be shifted. Practice of building cities, managing cities, and living in cities. And what we have discovered, and what all the people that will hear from in the next hour, is that cities, to do this, you need a practice that brings different sectoral ambitions together. You don't solve just a transport problem and then urban planning problem and then energy problem. You find solutions that actually help you do all these things together. The central thesis of UrbanShift is to bring this cross-sectoral solutions as a norm across. This is difficult, as you can imagine. Most cities are organized in departments, a planning department, transport department, energy department. So it's a shift in practice to bring this together to these kind of innovative solutions that we need as we go forward. It'll do in transportation, it'll work with disaster management, all kinds of in different places. It will focus on integrated solution that requires a new kind of practice, but also new kind of capacity. Where will it do? There is a slide I think you will see. Where will it take place? Inga pointed out, this will happen in two ways. It will happen in cities. The program will partner with these 23 cities, 9 countries. You can see them in your map. In Argentina, Brazil, Costa Rica, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, India, China, Indonesia. That's one. Work with these cities, find specific pollution problem they're facing, find the solution, help them create actual solution on the ground that people are better off, so we can see how does a new practice work. The second thing it'll do, it'll bring partners together, and I will introduce them in a second, to actually learn from what's happening here, learn from what's happening in other cities, and create this discourse globally so that we are learning much faster, and not only from these 23 cities, but actually across the world to change, thinking about how does one change the practice. There are about 5,000 cities in the world that has more than 100,000 people. So think, this is your responsibility as a city leader, not only to do what you're doing in your cities, but how do you work in the community so all 5,000 cities that actually require transformative change actually is happening. This kind of a program cannot be done by any one agency or any one institution, however big they are. The design of the program is actually collaboration. And you saw the slide in the beginning. There's a collaboration between us, which is WRI, C40, ICLEI, and United Nations Environment, that is represented by Inger. Mark, you will meet in a few minutes, and also you will meet with ICLEI and a lot of others. But I want to point out, it is also a very important partnership with Global Environment Facility and Carlos Manuel. And think about it for a minute. This is the Global Environment Facility that was set up to protect the environment, the ecosystems of the world. Why aren't they supporting cities? Because they realize exactly this, what Carlos says. If cities don't work, it is very difficult to protect environment, because most of the citizens, people who live in cities, are actually very much part of what is happening in the ecosystems around us. And Carlos, I want to thank you and Jeff for your leadership of actually bringing, this is only the second cycle that cities are being discussed as part of this. This partnership also includes many other organizations. WWF, WCSD, WEF, you will see in a slide, and IUCN, UN Habitat, of course, World Bank. And we are very grateful that we actually have a community of practitioners working together to do what needs to be done, because the ambition of this is absolutely enormous and much needed. How will we do this? What will the platform do? I just want to point out a few things that are obvious that the platform to do, shift the practice. This is in addition to what's going to happen in individual cities. So for example, there'll be city academies, which will basically online and in-person training. This has been all the partners that you have doing this. There'll be UrbanShift labs to practice how actually we learn from different kind of urban planning that brings this multiple outcome plans. We will have finance academies to get the finance in the right place. So cities have the capacity and the know-how to get the finance in place. So also we will work with the cities to advance their commitment. Most cities in the world actually have commitment that is ahead of their own countries, that's why cities are kind of vanguard of this shift. We will actually have national dialogues with cities and the national government, because our science shows the cities actually can do X amount of things themselves, but for them to really successful, they need to have enabling national policies. And finally, we will work with the overall sustainability agenda globally. We will bring the agenda for COP or any other global fora, so global leaders see what cities can do, need to do, and what they need to do to support the overall shift we need to take place. So I can't tell you how excited I am as a urban practitioner myself, and all the people I get to work with, and I hope all of you will join us to actually shift the practice of how we build cities, how we maintain cities as we go forward, because cities absolutely have to work for people, the planet, and of course, for our economy, for us to be successful as we go forward. With that, I want to thank you for listening, but also I want to introduce you a fantastic video our team has put together to introduce this wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you very much to a fantastic opening. Annie, thank you for your wonderful words, for Carlos Manuel and for Inger for setting out the vision and the actions. And for that, I would like to hand over the facilitation of the first panel, which is entitled Transitioning to Just and Green Cities, to Mark Watts, the Executive Director of C40. Mark.
Thank you, Martina, and hello, everybody. Wasn't that a great film? It was very positive, smile-inducing stuff. So we're at C40 very proud, like everybody else, to be part of this, the launch of UrbanShift. My job now is to move us into our first panel discussion, where we're going to start to dig into some of the transformations that we intend that UrbanShift will achieve and how we'll go about that. And in sort of setting up that discussion, I know that Inga quoted our UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres a couple of times, and I was also really struck by some of the things that he's been saying recently, particularly his message last week that the confluence of the pandemic, the climate and biodiversity crises, and the exacerbated divide between rich and poor as a result means we're really now at an inflection point in history. What we do next, and I think he meant what we do right now, will determine whether human civilization breaks down or alternatively breaks through to a new period of prosperity. And all of the speakers so far have reflected on how cities are right at the center of each of those major global challenges, often the place where impacts have been most acute, but also those really creative entrepreneurial hubs that have been really fast off the blocks to demonstrate how to set up a green and a just recovery from COVID-19. I've been really excited seeing how mayors and city leaders around the world have really been reinventing urban life in response to those lockdowns that have confined us to our neighborhoods. You've seen an exponential increase in public space, in parks, in cycle lanes, pedestrian access, that whole sort of 15-minute city concept. And now starting to see how city governments can channel what is unprecedented levels of at least peacetime public investment to build back better, create the foundations of a strong, fair economies for the future, where the majority of people will get better off while pollution comes down with the urgency that's demanded by our rapidly expiring carbon budget. And that's obviously particularly crucial as we're approaching COP26, where cities will bring a really strong message of science-based decision making. But bringing all of that together, we can really see in real time now that to deliver simultaneously on these multiple agendas, climate, COVID, equity, biodiversity, we need in our cities to embrace the concepts of collaboration and integration even more strongly. And that certainly means renewed internationalism, which the Secretary General has also been talking about, and city-to-city collaboration is a really great example of that, but also working in collaboration within cities, integrating budgets, skills, strategies across multiple sectors, planning, environment, housing, economic development, finance, the whole gamut of city government, and needing to demonstrate that addressing the risks to the future of our civilization is part of every decision, every investment, every budget. And what I hope we're going to get to in this session now is that doesn't just mean a whole of government approach, but a whole of society attitude. So engaging the talents and resources, the private sector, civil society, alongside local and national government. And certainly, as Arnie has described, that's what UrbanShift is all about. Pioneering efforts to support cities to pursue integrated planning and development opportunities. So if we turn to our panel now, who are going to help us unpick some of those challenges and opportunities. As you can see on the screen here, we have a stellar cast. First, Mayor Yvonne Akisoya, who is the Mayor of Freetown, Sierra Leone, and I'm very pleased to say a Vice Chair of my organisation, C40. Hitesh Vaidya, Director at the National Institute of Urban Affairs in India. Claire O'Neill, who will be very well known to many of you, Managing Director of Climate and Energy at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And then last but by no means least, Walter Vuoto, the Mayor of Ushuaia, Argentina. So format for this is we're going to have 2 rounds of questions for each of the panelists. They all know they only have 3 minutes to answer each question, so it's going to be a really tight and concise response. And Mayor Akisoya, I'm going to start with you, if that is okay. So thinking about resilience first here, we've really seen in the last few years, but particularly actually the last few months, just how much cities need to up their game in terms of resilience, particularly as we're seeing the impacts of the pandemic and of climate. And that concept of resilience really represents the idea of integration, requiring mobilization across lots of different agendas. And I know that's something, Mayor Akisoya, that you've really focused on with your Transform Freetown plan. Tell us something about that, about the Transform Freetown plan and how that's delivering climate resilience to your residents whilst improving their livelihoods.
Thanks a lot, Mark, and it's a pleasure to be here. Transform Freetown takes an integrated approach by looking at 11 priority sectors. And you might say, how can you have priorities and then use the number 11? But it really speaks to the fact that you need to take this integrated approach. So starting with environmental management, running through to urban planning and housing, sanitation, health, education, job creation, urban mobility, revenue mobilization, all of these need to be working together. And what we've seen, and as you say, the developments of the last few months have brought this into sharp focus globally. But what we've seen is that there's a need for resilience to be about the resilience of the people, but also about the resilience of the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, the natural landscape. So under environmental management, we are not only planting 1 million trees, Freetown to Tree Town, but we're also training communities, particularly those who find themselves in vulnerable areas. One of the earlier speakers talked about the fact that we've got so many 4 billion people living in informal settlements in our city. It's almost 40%, 35 to 40% of our population. So it's engaging them, helping them to do their own risk mapping, train them, but not just to say, what do you do in the event of a disaster, but also how to improve your lives, upgrading communities. This afternoon, I'm going to a session which is specifically focusing on the implementation of work we've been doing for 2 years now, looking at upgrading communities. You move on then to something like sanitation, where you're needing to ensure that one of our biggest emitters, waste management, is being dealt with, but in a context which allows green jobs to be created. So that resilience of people and resilience of place. Because in the absence of proper waste management, we saw some of the photographs in the documentary earlier on in the little video, we saw those photographs of illegal dump sites. Well, maybe not illegal dump sites, but of insanitary dump sites. And that interplay between how do you work on making waste, create a solution and a network and processes, but also doing the same with job creation. So the concept of integration, ensuring that you've got health facilities, ensuring that you're making the people resilient, planting the trees, reducing landslides, all of this is great. But I want to end by saying our integration and integrated approach only goes as far as enabling environments permit. And there are two factors of the enabling environment, which are great limitations for us as a city. And I'm sure that the experience of other cities. One is a failure of devolution of land use planning and building permits. If you do not have development control, then you can have all the great plans you want in the world. If somebody is being given permits to cut trees in order to build housing, to build in waterways, if you can't deal with that, if that's sitting at the central government level, that's a challenge. And the second limitation when it comes to that environment is that finance question. Without the money actually reaching us, and then, Jeff talked about working on how that can be, how they can find solutions. And we need the finance community to speed up that work, because everyone keeps saying this is the decade, 9 more years to go. That 9 years is going to turn to 8 to 7 to 6 and so forth. And if we are not able to make a very fast gear shift, like the urban shift, and ensure that we see finance being made available to cities, and we see development control being available to cities. Many of them in the global south, many cities do not have this critical function. We need that in order for our resilience to be a reality. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And in fact, I think I want to carry on with that part of that, your last 2 points there about the enabling environment. If I move to Hitesh now, and because this is something that in India through the Smart Cities mission, I believe been trying to address. So here a national program that aimed to empower cities to both drive economic development and at the same time reduce pollution. And I think in the most recent period also developing better emergency response systems to cope with the pandemic. So Hitesh, if maybe you could tell us something about that Smart Cities mission India program, please. You are on mute still, Hitesh. I don't know if you can unmute or if you can be unmuted.
Okay, am I okay? Yeah, sorry. Am I audible, Mark? Sorry.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great, thanks. So, Smart City Mission started way back in 2015. So now we are at least 5th year of Smart City Mission. And I think when the Smart City Mission started, the objective was as clear as Annie pointed out, which was how to improve the jobs in the cities, how to make quality of life better, and how we can make it more sustainable and environmental friendly. And when we started this mission, we thought that cities, and it was first time that autonomy was given to city, and you decide what you want to be, what is the smartness you want to be. And we thought people will come up with a greenfield smart cities. But out of 100 cities which were participating in the challenge, around 98 said we want to take bull by the horn. And they said we want to retrofit existing city into a smart city. I think that was the first win of the Smart City Mission, when the leaders of the city said we want to make our existing cities smart, rather than creating a very easy method of making a new smart city. So I think that's where, and today now 5 years down the line, we have around 5,000 infrastructure projects which are right now being implemented within the Smart City Missions. And they cover around 140 million Indians, if you talk about in terms of number. And the focus of if you look at the projects, and the focus is on urban greens, lake restoration, river development. Focus is on improving open space structures. Focus is on developing sustainable transformation solutions. Focus is on making governance citizen friendly and cost effective. And last is how to improve disaster preparedness. All these projects are in that time. There was no issue discussion at that time how they are resilient, how they are climate friendly. That was a very minimum at that time when it started. But we recently, with the last 6 months back during the COVID, we said, okay, let's look at how are these projects, how are these cities mainstreaming climate actions within their thinking. Are they really climate oriented? Are they really sustainable? And we did a climate assessment framework, at least all these 126 cities, with 28 very simple indicators in 5 themes. And we looked at how they are doing in urban planning and green cover, how they are doing in energy and built environment, how they are doing in mobility and air quality, how they are doing the water, and last, how doing waste management. So these were 5 broad areas. We did a climate assessment framework within same 100 smart cities. And I'll be very happy to announce today, without any strategic intervention, just smart city was doing a infrastructure investment. Cities have started thinking, and I'm not saying they have achieved, they have started thinking of climate issues within themselves. I think that's a great achievement. And the results were very, very, I think if you look at the results which we just came out of 126 cities, because we looked at 100 cities and 26 cities which are capital cities within India, we found that 65 cities have more than 12% of green cover. And they have started coming up with the strategies and action plans to rejuvenate water bodies and open areas. So that was a great achievement. I will say, I'm not getting into numbers. We have also, all states and urban states have started establishing green building cells. I think that's a area where they are looking how to make my cities building more green, built environment more green. 59 cities have reported that they use CNG-based electric rickshaws. In India, we have electric rickshaws for their mobility. 67 cities have developed water resource management plans. And 98 cities have banned single-use plastic, including plastic less than 550 micron. So those are the really amazing thing that cities have already started without any strategic intervention. And I think a lot of things which we saw, and India showed a resilient, Indian cities really demonstrated a great resilience and taken a multiple initiatives, which is your second question on COVID. And I think that was the area, but I think a lot of lessons were, which we learned during this whole thing, the leadership at the city level definitely mattered quite a bit. City took those challenges on their own, and we did a 3 broad approach while we are looking at it: recover, response, and strive, where cities started looking at how do you work on a different methods to really put recovery response within the city. How do you respond to through a GIS based city? I'll give you an example and stop here. There was when we started integrated command and control centers as a proposals in 5 years back, when a lot of cities have started, they were saying that you have created a white elephants. You are just wasting money in creating these white elephants, which will do nothing. There will be a good buildings, nothing will happen. A lot of computers will be bought and nothing. But these integrated command and control center came very handy when COVID happened, because we could immediately find out databases, we can respond to the situation, and we can recover from that. So that was a great initiative I think we had introduced. But I will stop here. We need a lot of, as Yoni has said, and he also talked about, there is a lot of capacities have to be built at the local level. The peer-to-peer learning have to be done, which Annie has talked about. And we, as an, I come from the National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is a think tank, and our focus is on bridging the gap between the practice and the policy. And we are coming up with we have established climate center for cities, and where we are trying to look at a climate alliance, bringing people together, having a discussion, and look forward this Urban Shift program really inspire or instigate us to take a next step, and we go forward on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Claire, I'm going to turn to you next, and we've been focusing in the start of this session really around the role of city governments, including how national governments can empower. But of course, the success of cities depends on a much wider group of actors, very importantly, the business sector, which you represent. There's a lot of city government practitioners on this call. And maybe you could talk to us, what does good partnership between city government and business look like, and what are your recommendations to the city governments in the Urban Shift program about how they should go about that?
Well, thanks, Mark. And look, it's fantastic to see you again, and so many great colleagues. And if you'll forgive me just for spending a couple of seconds, just I think underlining some of the messages that we've heard, because of course, before I came to WBCSD, I was one of those central government policymakers, and I just wanted to sort of re-emphasize really the sensibleness of what we've heard from Yvonne and Hitesh, and in some of the framing remarks, because 70% of the 70% of our urban emissions are coming from cities. Generally, those who are in control at the local level control directly about 30% of those emissions. And in order to really make a difference, of course, you have to forge alliances, and frankly, it's often easier to generate a coalition of the willing created around your local decision makers and the business community than it is to get traction out of central government. I'm here to tell you, we all wish in central government it could be different. Often it's decades upon decades of planning law or regulatory bump that is incredibly hard to overturn. And that's why at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, for whom I now lead the Energy and Climate Programme, we are very involved in the Cities and Business Climate Alliance, along with yourselves, along with C40 and with CDP. WBCSD represents over 200 of the world's most sustainable global businesses, all of whom are physically based somewhere. So both in terms of their home communities, but also the communities of their supply chain, they're acutely aware of their ability to influence positively those particular outcomes. And of course, the other thing that businesses do, and I know local politicians often do better than national politicians, is think very practically around the solution. Look, we all have a huge stake in the COP process, and God willing, we will have outcomes that we can celebrate in mid-November. But it's really tough to really drive the sorts of progress that we need at a national level. And it's very hard to take citizens with you. And in the UK at the moment, we're facing quite tough energy conditions. They're nothing to do with renewables. They're all to do with supply challenges in the gas system. But you're starting to see kind of consumer pushback. The great thing about cities is it's possible to solve for climate positive outcomes, but also nature positive, people positive, and frankly, just a much better place to live. So the opportunity to create something beautiful that works well, that gives people a better quality of life, that is also ticking our sustainability agenda, is absolutely there. And you can really create positive citizen power around that. I did want to flag how difficult it is for many of the leaders here today, and why this Urban Shift programme is so helpful. So I'm sure you'll all be facing enormous resource constraints in terms of trying to solve for these long-term sustainability challenges, but also keep your lights on, keep your water flowing, keep your waste collected, keep your streets safe. And as other panelists have said, often, without control of many of those levers. We know that crisis planning is increasingly a challenge. And so as well as thinking over the long-term sustainability agenda, city leaders and mayors have to think about the short-term crisis planning. And we also know, as we said, that the relationship with central government can frankly be messy. And it's not through a lack of goodwill on either side, it's just that legacy kind of red tape stuff. So I think what's incredibly exciting about Urban Shift, and why we're so thrilled to be involved on behalf of the business community, is this opportunity for bottom-up practical problem solving. We heard a little bit about some examples of what some of the best cities are doing. Examples like Manchester in the UK are another place where this city, public sector, private sector sort of vigor is really being demonstrated with some very clear, I mean, what we need basically is clear guidelines, transferability of advice, empowered leaders, all of the things that are represented both within the existing coalitions and upon which UrbanShift is absolutely built. But I guess I was thinking hard about, you know, what are the messages that I would pass along? And I think we've discussed it already. I mean, courage. You know, we are out of time, as we heard so eloquently at the beginning of this conversation, and we are outside these benevolent boundaries of atmosphere that have enabled us actually to become a settled species living in these urban clusters. And I think a lot of the innovation and a lot of the really positive thinking is coming from this group of amazing leaders, not focusing necessarily on the protocol and the policy, just focused on the very practical, how do we assemble the biggest and most important coalition to get things done? And that requires courage. And sometimes city leaders have to go out on a limb and they have to make themselves somewhat unpopular. And many city leaders sometimes are thinking, I've got an eye on public office in the national government, you know, and so there are sort of political questions to be in account, but being very courageous. And ultimately, be proud of some of the solutions. Hitesh just described a big data lab that we don't have in most cases for the climate emergency at any level. We are incredibly short of real-term practical data that we can act on. And so there are solutions being developed now that I think are hugely important for the whole system to focus on as we move to solve the climate crisis. And this is why I think the UrbanShift initiative, which is actually creating labs, but through the partners that are participating are actually delivering these living labs of what the future could look like, is so incredibly important. So get everyone involved, be brave, and don't be afraid to kind of trumpet your achievements, because national and international governance structures can also learn from them too. Thank you.
Correct. It's a great message, and I think that focus on courage. I know the mayors on this call have displayed a lot of those qualities. And indeed, we're going to move now to Mayor Vuoto. For those that don't know your city, I've never been there, and apologies if my pronunciation is wrong, but Ushuaia. It's in an extraordinary part of the world between southern Patagonia and Antarctica. So right on the front line of the climate crisis, you're seeing the impacts right in front of your eyes. Just tell us something, Mayor, from your extraordinary individual perspective. How is climate breakdown affecting the life and the economy of your city, and what measures are you putting in place to safeguard lives and livelihoods?
Bueno, buenos días, Mark. Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here virtually, but very, very excited to share this space with you all. As Inger was saying, this is a global community that we're very happy to be part of. I would like to thank the United Nations, UNEF, Carlos Manuel as well, with whom we have actually been working together with the national government and the Environment Ministry in this GEF7 program, Carbon Integrated Plan for the Argentinian cities. So I'm very happy to be here as representing the southernmost city in the world and expressing these concepts that come from the need of what we have to do for the thousands of cities in the world that every day aim to find different ways to improve life for people, to protect them from the negative effects of climate change, but also constantly thinking about creative ideas that are based on generating a new relationship with our planet and its ecosystems that allow us to live harmoniously with all living beings, which is like this platform that we are presenting today, UrbanShift, which for us is a novelty and a great opportunity as well. I come from a small city from the south, every day we wake up looking at Antarctica, and we see how global warming is really impacting our landscape. There are no geographical barriers for this problem. And we can see how these problems are being manifested here at the end of the world with more aggressive ways on our infrastructures, on our ecosystems, and of course, on our most vulnerable communities. The increase of temperatures puts into danger our ecosystems and infrastructure. So it is necessary to have a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions immediately if we aim to improve the quality of life of our citizens. And we all here, everyone who is connected to this call, who has heard Claire and Mark and Yvonne and Hitesh, we know that even though cities are one of the main reasons why climate change is happening because of their great consumption of energy, they are also the most impacted. And most of our cities are close to water, which means that climate phenomena really impact on these cities. And this makes it ever more urgent to act in this regard. We can see also how it is important to understand how cities can be the center of creativity and innovation towards these problems. The innovation in energy, mobility, and urban infrastructure have a great opportunity here to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I do believe, as a mayor of this small city, I would like to call upon all of you to improve our climate situation and looking forward without leaving anyone behind. The risks of climate change, as the ones that we see in rising sea levels and the loss of biodiversity, the melting of the ice caps. Also, this has impact in other sides of the world, for example, where we see forest fires in incredible amounts. So this can be also translated into big problems for all of the inhabitants of our cities. It is very unlikely for these consequences to be equally distributed in our cities. Actually, this type of effects reinforce inequality in our cities. Therefore, climate change can actually make it more difficult for our social fabric to be stable. And coming back to the question, we can see that how the main challenges of the cities for or towards sustainable development need to be incorporated towards public policies that contribute to social resiliency and social justice, as well as to incorporate citizen participation in every policy that we implement. We need to also include the normal citizen as part of these public policies that need to be implemented by local governments in order to improve our governance levels. We need to promote environmental education and implement programs that will allow us to adapt. And this is a big challenge. As you were all saying, it is very important to think about how to more efficiently manage our resources in order to reach that specific point. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mayor. And Martina has just reminded me we've got about 5 minutes left for this panel. So I do want to get a second question in, but it's going to need to be the 1 minute answer, everybody, if you can, please. So Mayor Akisoya, just coming back to you, and I want to carry on where you finished, and you were talking about the enabling infrastructure, one part of which is finance. What are you doing to overcome that barrier of availability of finance? But I guess more importantly for this, how do you see the partners in UrbanShift being able to help you?
It's the finance question is one around structure. We're all getting the figures, 384 billion available for financing for climate action. 85% of that is going to Western cities, to the global north. That's one issue. For the amounts that are committed to the global south, the 100 billion that was mentioned back in COP25, and then again, the Paris Agreement, 75% is coming as concessional loans. So what we need UrbanShift to do is to help us make this reality call. If the finance is there, but the finance is not accessible, then the finance is not there. So that would be my call. Let's begin to look at how cities directly, and that's the other piece, we need to have a mechanism which allows cities to go directly and not through national governments. I know 1 minute is up, so I'm stopping.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Very, very clear. Hitesh, coming to you. You talked in your first answer about the cities working together with the government in India. This, of course, now is an international program. What do you think the Indian cities participating in UrbanShift are going to be able to gain from learning and working with other cities across borders?
Great. I will also be as short as possible. But two things I will say. One is UrbanShift has to come up with the language. The climate language has to be the language of cities. I emphasize that because the climate language is not understood by the cities. So they have to contextualize that. That's my one. Second thing, very clear 5T approach, which is, and that has been my experience for last 2 years, cities are asking not knowledge, they're asking tools. Second thing, they're asking templates and standards. Third thing, they're asking technologies. Fourth, they're asking training and hand-holding and capacity building. And fifth is transfer of knowledge, best practices, good practices. I think if UrbanShift can bring this 5T approach, that will be a real support to the Indian cities who are without any strategic influence have already started thinking about climate action to take it forward. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you. And Claire, again, picking up where you left off, you talked very eloquently about the need for courage and empowering mayors to have that courage. What about with your constituency and the business community? What are you doing to give them courage to work with city governments, including through this programme?
Thanks, Mark. Well, I think we're seeing a huge shift in the sort of mindsets of leaders in the most sustainable companies who are focused on long-term resilience towards a regenerative approach to business sustainability and basically kind of looking for true value creation rather than value from sort of value extraction, if you like. So we work with the most sustainable companies. We have now world-leading membership criteria that are based on climate positive, nature positive, inequality reducing, committed to full transparency. And ultimately, as we set out in our Vision 2050 strategy, we need everybody in. If we want to have 9 billion people, which is who are projected to live on the earth by 2050, living well within planetary boundaries, we've all got to be in that space. And I think it's exciting actually to see how the world's most sustainable businesses are really stepping up to that challenge.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally, Mayor Vuoto, you have just signed the UN's Cities Race to Zero campaign. So pledge to do your fair share of halving global emissions in the next decade, which is a remarkable commitment for quite a small city. And as you set out, a very difficult situation in terms of climate impacts. What's the message you'd like to give to inspire hundreds, thousands of your peer mayors around the world to follow your example? Mayor, you are on mute.
Sí, en la disculpa, Mark.
I apologize for that, Mark, that I was muted. So in the Ushuaia municipality, we know that the environmental and social go hand in hand, and everything we do related to environment will improve the quality of life, as well as any other social policy. If we improve habitat, if we improve transportation, that will also improve the quality of life of the ecosystems. So when we think about a sustainable model for Ushuaia that is directed towards carbon neutrality towards 2050, it is currently a big challenge that we have taken on that requires all the technical teams to be involved, that requires political will to be involved as well for all the different stakeholders, but and they all have different priorities, but with a common purpose of having a more just, more adjusted city as it regards to climate change, and important to never leave anyone behind. And I would like to finish with a phrase from Pope Francis that he mentioned in the Taking Care of Our Common House, that says that the urgent challenge of protecting our home includes the urgent need of including the whole of humanity in the search of a comprehensive and comprehensive solution. We know that things can change, and we know that this change happens bottom up, from the local to global, from the cities to the world. So I'm calling all of you to start improving this type of models in harmony with nature, and we are still on time. We still have time. We need to assume our roles as local leaders in this generational challenge. Thank you very much for your attention, and we hope to see you all in Ushuaia one day.
Thank you very much, Mayor. That's a wonderful place to end this session. Thank you very much to all of our fantastic panelists, Mayor Yvonne Akisoy, Hitesh Veda, Claire O'Neill, and Mayor Walter Vuoto. I am now delighted to be handing over to a very good friend of mine, the leader of a sister city organisation, ICLEI, Gino van Begen, the Secretary General of ICLEI. Gino, over to you.
Here we go. I hope we are good. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you for chairing this first panel, and I would like to extend my gratitude, first of all, to Carlos Manuel and the colleagues of the GEF, and obviously to Inger and to Martina, to you, Mark, and to Annie of WI, as we're all working together in this fantastic project, UrbanShift. My name is Gino van Begen. I'm indeed the Secretary General of ICLEI, and as I just said, together with C40 WI and our colleagues at the GEF and UNEP as a leading implementing agency, we are working, however, also with other implementing agencies to deliver on this urban shift. And in this particular panel now, I think we have something like 15 minutes to go. We will be introducing those particular implementing agencies who have been involved from the very beginning at the design of the, as it is called, the National Child Project. So those national projects have been identified to be part of the program, together with the city governments who have been selected, as well as the NGOs and other stakeholders that do come together. The UrbanShift is a project or program is a essential collaborative effort, and I think in this first panel here we heard several times how important it is to seek that collaboration both vertically and horizontally at all levels of government. And so here it is really great to have today a number of the representatives of those implementing agencies, UN agencies that are helping us all to deliver towards the nations and the cities that are involved in these projects. So with this, I would like to open our panelists and ask also our panelists to zoom in particular in on the cooperation element that is embedded in UrbanShift, and to share your views on collaboration across the sectors, in particular between stakeholders, horizontally and vertically, to achieve our common goals. I am therefore delighted to introduce to you our distinguished panelists, Mrs. Matreya Das, who is the practice manager for the Global Programs Units, Urban DRM, Resilience and Land Global Practice at the World Bank, Madam Trilata Camilla, head of the Climate Change Adaptation, Nature, Climate and Energy Bureau for Policy and Program Support, Global Policy Network at the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. And then finally, Nita Procel, the Chief of the Water Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank. Thank you very much, ladies, to be with us today. as UNEP is also a lead implementing agency, but since we have heard already from Inger in her introduction remarks, the great perspective and the work that UNEP is also doing in this field, I would like to suggest, Martina, if that is okay to you, to not focus in particularly on UNEP and your projects in Argentina, Brazil, and India, but instead use the remaining time for our three panelists. So I would now then like to turn to Matria Das from the World Bank. And Matria, I think the World Bank has been a strong player in the predecessor of the UrbanShift program under the GEF6. At that time, it was called the Global Platform for the Impact Program for Stable Cities, the SKIP. And World Bank has been very much in the forefront of the cities agenda. And I would like just to ask you, what experiences have you as World Bank, as a at that time also lead implementing agency for the predecessor, what have you learned from that, and how can that be transferred into this UrbanShift project? How can you help indeed to connect that local action with national support? Matria, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Gino, and real pleasure to be here with this panel, but particularly at the launch of UrbanShift. So I just want to congratulate the UrbanShift team for this launch. Also want to congratulate all of the partners, and a big thanks to Jeff, to GF, that has been supporting all of this work, and particularly the work that I'm going to talk a bit more about, which is the Global Platform for Sustainable Cities. As Gino, you pointed out, it is a precursor to UrbanShift, and it is sort of the mechanism through which GEF6 was implemented, one of the mechanisms through which GEF6 was implemented. And indeed, we have a lot of learning. I do want to start by saying that, any learning that we may have has to be adapted to our current context, because we did not think when we started with GEF6 that we would be at this very cataclysmic moment that we find ourselves in. And it is that simultaneity of crises and the simultaneity almost of calamities that we find ourselves in, which is the climate crisis, the ongoing COVID crisis, and inequality, as well as state fragility that we are seeing across many parts of the world. So it's this cumulative impact that we are finding ourselves in the midst of. And as Ani pointed out, we don't have the time to do it sequentially. We are having to deal with it simultaneously. And that puts a huge, that's a challenge for sure, but in many ways, and I hesitate to say this in a disingenuous way, but it is an opportunity as well, because we do have an opportunity to take the learnings that we had from GEF6 and from other programs of the past and to apply them to a new world, as it were. So what are some of the learnings that we've had from the Global Platform for Sustainable Cities? First, and this was highlighted many times, it is the importance of the integrated approach. And I realize that talking about an integrated approach sometimes seems a bit sanguine, where people think an integrated approach is something that can just come about. An integrated approach, and here I'm going back to my role in government and in city governments, an integrated approach is inherently about governance. It is about not just municipal governance, but governance across the board. So the level of decentralization and devolution, the extent to which different agencies can horizontally intersect, and who has the power. What is the political economy of that integration? Because the political economy of the integration is a really important part of achieving that integration. So how do you navigate that integration? That's a really, really important part of it. And we have some very interesting learnings from the cities that have been our partners, 30 cities that have been our partners during GEF6. So that's one aspect of the learning, is certainly integration, but the nuances of integration, not just the jargon of integration, but the nuance of it. A second point I want to make is the importance, and again, this has been mentioned before, so I'm not saying anything hugely unique in mentioning this, but the importance of peer learning. and the importance of cities learning from each other, but not just cities learning from each other, it is agencies learning from each other. And I do want to highlight the importance of learning from communities, because who's at the forefront of many of these crises? It is the communities, it is the residents of the cities. What are we learning from them? And how are we taking that learning and then converting that into a policy context, into programmatic context? That's very important. So learning across the board and the importance of knowledge. And I know that Hitesh Vaidya said, knowledge per se is not what cities are looking for. That's true. It's not knowledge per se that cities are looking for. But what cities are looking for is knowledge that is then adapted and applied. So it's really the importance of applied knowledge. What we have done in GPSC is a lot of upstream, what we call analytical work, where we have tried to tease out some concepts, some ideas, and to be able to make that digestible for cities to be able to apply. So that's a second learning. And then a final learning, again, that the mayor's panel, the city leaders panel before us highlighted as well, is financing. And what I want to say is that on the financing side, as well as on the broader cities and climate side, what we're finding is that the learnings from GEF 6 within our programs at the World Bank are already moving almost through osmosis in a lot of our programs. So we have several programs that are related, and that are related both to urban resilience, to cities and climate. I do want to highlight the City Climate Gap Fund, which we recently launched and which has really taken off, and the importance of climate finance city climate finance becomes extremely important. Another program that we have, which is also very related, is the City Resilience Program. And there as well, we take the idea of the upstream, the planning, the financing, and the partnerships, and bring those together to provide advisory services to cities. And then, of course, GPSC is a program that is something that we hope to continue. We launched Cities for Biodiversity, which is a program only last week. And we're going to take forward some of these learnings that I've just talked to you about. The time is really short. I could go on about this. I do realize that my panelists have a lot to say as well. So let me hand it back to you, Gino, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Maitreya, and thank you for looking at the time as well. I do indeed wish to provide opportunities to our next panelists, but it is great to hear how the World Bank also, you as an institution, also learned from the GPSC, from this predecessor as well, and how you're integrating that and linking it to other programs that you are running. So thank you very much for that, Maitreya. I'll turn now without any delay to our next panelist from UNDP. So Srilata, UNDP is leading on projects, in particularly, I believe, in Morocco and Costa Rica under this GEF 7 funded program, and you are or were also leading on in Paraguay under the GEF 6 project. And here, perhaps here, my question to you, based on the on your experience as UNDP, both under the GEF 6 and 7, with this program, with this and the projects in those countries. How do you see, or have you learned also opportunities for those cities to actually contribute to the nationally determined contributions of those countries? I mean, we discussed also beforehand in the first panel how important it is to look and to start working indeed on as an emergency actually on climate issues, and to bring climate into that integrated urban planning. So we would like to understand, is with your help as UNDP, have you been able to bring national governments and city governments up to speed, and up to an extent actually that this can also lead to more ambitious targets that these countries and parties will put on the table in November now? Please, Srilata.
Thank you, Gino. Let me just start by saying it's an absolute pleasure to be part of this panel and this event and the launch of UrbanShift. So let me also join in others in congratulating the partners on the launch of UrbanShift, which has been in several statements emphasizing the need for cities to be at the forefront of climate action. Many of the speakers spoke about the responsibility and contribution of cities to the global CO2 emissions. And I also wanted to say, I mean, the pandemic has made it even more visible, and it's reinforced the pre-existing inequalities that exist in many of the vulnerable, marginalized areas of the city, the neighborhoods, and the infrastructure that functioning cities rely on. And also has been highlighted, fortunately, cities have been leading climate action, and there's local and regional governments, and we've heard some excellent mayors speaking of the initiatives in their cities and how essential a role they play in fulfilling NDCs as we move towards a more inclusive and sustainable recovery. And in the recent synthesis report as well from UNFCCC, some of these roles have been highlighted, from energy efficient buildings to clean and affordable energy to low carbon public transport to sustainable waste management, etc. And another message that's very clear, both in the experiences and through the GEF projects you mentioned on the ground and what we're hearing, is the importance of a whole of society approach for climate action and in fulfilling the NDCs. And so, climate action without accounting for and engaging cities is really moot. And to the extent that this advances SDGs, this is where the intersection, I think, both the complexity of the multiple crises that have been laid out, but the solutions and opportunities that exist at the city level, I think, are very critical. And in terms of NDCs, about 113 of the previous 164 NDCs had some strong or moderate urban content, quite a bit focusing on adaptation. And UNDP's Climate Promise initiative, which is the world's largest offer of support for enhancement of countries' climate pledges as we head up to COP26, has been also critical in bringing, again, the whole society approaches and the focus as well on integrated approaches, inclusive approaches in enhancing the NDCs, and further support, of course, post the update to implementing them. Currently, there's about 119 countries who are supporting enhance their NDCs in collaboration with over 35 partners. And this represents 80% of all developing countries and about 30% of global emissions. And we've heard how much of these global emissions the cities contribute to. So in specific terms, engagement UNDP with UrbanShift in the 3 projects you've indicated, Gino, starting with Paraguay, which is a project that was designed in GEF 6, focused quite a bit of many elements and messages of partners have spoken about, focused on integrated urban planning, across mitigation and adaptation, holistic approaches from sustainable mobility to flood prevention to biodiversity conservation, and really working with strengthening metropolitan city councils and enabling participation of multiple stakeholders from across private sector to civil society and community members themselves in better informing the planning and implementation of measures and across, again, adaptation as well as mitigation. I wanted to highlight a few results. I'm happy to bring in some tangible results that could sort of inspire and speak to really the decentralized, devolved nature of work that we can all support as partners. And this was also something other mayors have pointed out. And results such as 11 municipalities of the metropolitan region are now finalizing their land use and disaster risk reduction plans with support from the project. There are about 600 kilometers of connected bicycle lanes that have been co-designed with the civil society, integrating a gender lens into it. There's a competition on waste segregation that involved many neighborhoods and families and resulted in the recovery of about 30 tons of recyclable materials. And the partnerships, coming back to that, from multinational companies to civil society like Paraguayan Network for Sustainable Cities, the NGO Gora Paraguay. This is critical. Again, going back to this theme that working in urban areas on climate action that intersects and advances multiple SDGs indeed requires a whole of society approach. And the lessons from this project have been used to structure 2 projects on the GEF7 around in Costa Rica, the one on mainstreaming decarbonization, transitioning to a green economy. And this speaks to the heart of, again, the questions that were brought up in terms of financing. And this particular project focuses on innovative financing at the municipal level to bridge the financial gap, to be able to help implement the decarbonization plan across restoration of urban landscape, promotion of electric vehicles, solid waste management, and wastewater management. And really the aim is that with the restoration of these green urban areas and reforms to diversify state revenue generation, this project aims to contribute to job creation and for a green recovery, as well as the NDC implementation, which was the question you were asking about. And then in Morocco, the Sustainable Cities Impact Project in Marrakesh focuses on integrating innovative approaches in the design and planning of green urban projects. And Marrakesh has been a globally recognized leader in terms of the local leadership and very good governance and innovation in terms of integrated approaches and frameworks for sustainable development. And so this project builds institutional capacities at all levels and to leverage innovative instruments to enable climate risk mitigation, decision-making, and really a value creation, as Claire also mentioned, and generating returns and optimizing value for money across the life cycle of urban assets, across various sectors from water resiliency, energy, transport, biodiversity, and waste management. And what examples highlight is really the power of partnerships. When we talk about how to support NDCs, it is important to make sure that the NDCs are not a sort of an ephemeral document, but it's really the engagement and codifies governance, private sector, and civil society coming together and implementing the NDCs. And with UrbanShift, the focus on integrated approach is critical to ensure this as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renata. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences from the side of UNDP. And thank you also to, we hear only positive things that you can take into this UrbanShift from the experiences made under the GEF6. So thank you very much. To all participants, I would just like to ask you to be indulgent with us. I would just like to ask you to stay with us for another 10 minutes because I do like to give the floor to our representatives from the Asian Development Bank, Madam Nita Pockrell, also to share with us the experience you have made or you are making as implementing agency in the UrbanShift program. And perhaps, Nita, if it is possible, perhaps you could just give us a bit of a flavor also of how you and your institution is actually being leveraged, in particularly in investments around urban resilience, nature-based investments, etc., to shine maybe a light on that angle. Please, Nita, please.
Thank you, Gino. I do realize I'm already on overtime, so I'll be very short. I just have to also congratulate the partners on the launch because it is special to, and pity not to say, and I'm very pleased to be here. It is a well-considered design, if I may start with that. It also aligns very nicely with ADB Strategy 2030, where we set our direction and approach on how we help build livable cities in Asia and Pacific, cities that are green, competitive, inclusive, and resilient. And offerings such as UrbanShift are very important for our region because by 2030, cities in our region in Asia and the Pacific are projected to have 55% of the region's population, 2.5 billion people, which is fair few. And we also estimate that 1.7 trillion annually is required for infrastructure in our region to maintain growth, eradicate poverty, and respond to climate change. And that is excluding the soft services. So considering the short time, I'll just go straight to an example in Chennai, where we are working collaboratively with UNEP. As many of you know, Chennai is highly exposed to flood risk from extreme weather events. And the Climate Change Vulnerability Index of 2021 ranks Chennai as the highest among large Indian cities in terms of exposure to climate change threats. So there, to strengthen the climate and disaster resilience of one of the most flood-prone river basins, the Chennai Costa Rica River Basin, ADB, Government of Tamil Nadu, and the Greater Chennai Corporation, we are currently processing a project with $251 million financing from ADB. And while the investment loan itself takes a robust and holistic approach to flood risk management with adaptive measures through combination of structural and non-structural measures, the JEF financing of around 7 million has provided a very important additionality through support for water body restoration at Lake Kadapam, adopting the nature-based solutions. And many of you may know Lake Kadapam, if you know Chennai at all, is one of the major water bodies which is connected through channels to other lakes and drains in the basin. So together, the grant and loan funds, the project is not only enhancing this flood retention capacity to restore the function as a basin and balancing reservoir and increasing water availability, it is also increasing biodiversity, ecosystems, and providing resilience and inclusion for citizens, including the recreational usage. So we expect this demonstration in an investment that has nature-based solution will serve as a model. And I think many of the previous speakers talked about having a model that is for peer demonstration in its reality when it's implemented. So this type of initiative, we hope will also help ADB and other financiers and the governments to mainstream nature-based solutions into their financing and operations. And I remember Yvonne, the mayor of Freetown, just earlier in the panel mentioned financiers like us and called on us to make sure that cities financing is available now on this shifted approach and available directly. And I can assure you that we at ADB are committed to doing just that. And second, the participation of UrbanShift, why it is important for cities in Asia like Chennai, is not only the opportunity to learn, share experience, enhance their networks, help shape the program as we go forward, but again, for this showcasing is extremely important. I won't go through the example of Vietnam in detail in the interest of time, but we are again taking the same approach of supporting secondary cities, 3 of them, Ha Giang Hu and Vinh Yên, with a grant that is about 13 million under the Sustainable Cities approach, being used in tandem with a $170 million ADB loan, again, taking multiple combined approaches of hard and soft infrastructure combined with the resilient planning, disaster risk insurance, and pilot investments. So in closing, I just want to also emphasize, like many others have, we are making cities more livable as we all joining hands, but it does require approaches that are resilient, that are integrated, multi-sectoral, and framing of these solutions are very difficult to address the complex challenges. They can be very precarious, and the entry points need to be really carefully coordinated and executed. And it's great to see that UrbanShift is trying to do just that. So again, we're very pleased to be part of this initiative, and we assure you from ADB side of our support to make sure that it is a success. Thank you, Gino.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nita. And thank you also, Maitreya and Srilata, to our 3 panelists here for your very interesting remarks drawing on the experiences in the different project countries in UrbanShift program. I think after we have heard from the Jeff, from UNEP, from our mayors here, from the various stakeholders also, and the implementing agencies, I think we should emphasize that multi-stakeholder collaboration is vital to achieve the ambitions of this particular program. The role of cities and local governments to lead their communities with integrated local planning and action in diverse areas and sectors will help those cities and local governments themselves, but also us collectively, to achieve local, national, and global goals of sustainability. And it has been said, the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals are, of course, our guiding beacons for this. But this connection between local and global is a great incentive for local leadership, but also creates a discussion around the critical needs for national enabling frameworks. We as ICLE, together with my colleagues from C40, definitely we are calling on all cities around the globe to join the global movement and sign up to the Cities Race to Zero and Cities Race to Resilience efforts, for example, and to make our local and regional commitments very clear and announce these also to our national government leaders and help them also to therefore to accelerate action. And to national governments and the international community, we are asking you to support all these local efforts that we have heard here and that are being combined in this demonstration of the UrbanShift program in particularly. The national local dialogues that are being foreseen as part of this program can help open up communication and coordination through all the levels of government in your country. And you can also consider, obviously, to bring these local contributions into your national commitment plans and bring these into the NDC implementation and other investment plans. We, as ICLE now, in particularly as a focal point for local and regional governments around the world, to represent them at global arenas such as the Climate COP26. We will continue these discussions also through the UrbanShift program and bring this to the table of all our partners. With this, I would just like to thank Martina, the Jeff. I would like to thank UNEP for your essential assistance, guidance, not only in the UrbanShift program, but also in this particular session here today, to help us all to draw the attention to more sustainable integrated urban planning and sustainable development, ultimately, of course, to accelerate climate action. Thank you all very much, and once again, a big thank you to our panelists here of panel 2 as well as of panel 1. Over to you again, Martina. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gino. Thank you very much to all our partners and the speakers for these rich contributions, and to all the participants for having joined us and stayed with us even over time. We also had a very rich question and answer session, and we managed to respond to a whole lot of the questions, and as we had promised at the outset, those that we haven't managed to respond to during the session, we will do right afterwards. This is clearly only the beginning of the project, and there will be further opportunities to be engaged in the future. Please connect with us, and you see on the slide a number of opportunities to do so through social media and our new website that we are launching as well. It is really about creating this movement, and it will only be as good as all of us working together. So we really look forward to a very collaborative effort, and I would like to thank also the team for such a great collaborative effort in putting this event together. And for this is the official close of the meeting. Thank you so much again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.